Chapter 4: John Chandler, the League, and Graygon. Originally, Strickland's intent was to allow the students to devote only a few classes to the project, but it ended up extending the better part of the term. As the project progressed, it gained notoriety in the university publications and became a topic of interest inside and, eventually, outside of the university. The local news stations and publications did some short pieces on it, and even a few national news networks gave it a mention. Strickland and his class became minor celebrities. Neither Professor Strickland nor his students ever imagined that that class would eventually have a place in the future history books. However, as the assignment took form, they all began to realize, even Jordan, that it had more merit than it had initially been given credit for. Their discussions gave cooperatism more credibility and shed some discerning light on some very worrisome problems with the existing money system. Professor Strickland had recorded the discussions held in class. He edited and organized them and compiled a concise manuscript entitled An Exploration of the Beckwith Principles in the Context of a Modern Industrial Society. He gave a copy to each of the students and, with their permission, published it as a small book. The book became immensely popular, causing a resurgence of interest in the topic of cooperatism, showering those in class with a great deal of new notoriety. Ever since Charlene's publication, there had been scatterings of supporters for cooperatism worldwide. Strickland's publication became a respected reference for cooperatist enthusiasts and reopened this dormant and controversial subject. Again, for a time, cooperatism became a hot topic. There were many rebuttals and commentaries on both sides. Most people agreed with the many flaws of the money system and were sympathetic to the sentiments and fairness of the cooperative system, but still felt that eliminating the entire money system was far too extreme and naive, and that the admired attributes of cooperatism could be realized by improving and making modifications to the existing money system. Although many expressed a wish that such a system as cooperatism were indeed possible, they ultimately didn't believe it was. Also, orchestrating a transition from the trenches of an established money system would be an accomplishment of immeasurable magnitude. Even as the idea gained interest, any consideration of some sort of actual conversion was deemed ludicrous. And there was very staunch, powerful opposition in the form of the upper class and corporate elite. Although cooperatism was popularized once again, its ultimate credibility was effectively downplayed and subtly discredited by the trusted authorities on these matters. The general populace was very much influenced during this era by these authorities, presenting their views and arguments on the major news networks. People were inclined to dismiss cooperatism as an interesting idea that was too idealistic and impractical to ever work on a national scale. It took a great many years for circumstances to come about that would allow for such a change to be possible. The students of the class all went on with their own lives in their own separate directions, using their notoriety as a stepping stone to help forge their careers. One of the students, John Chandler, was particularly taken with cooperatism, and along with several others in the class, Milt Connolly, Patty Stanton, and Scott Moody, formed the Cooperatists of America. At first, it was limited to students at the university, but after the book became popular, it expanded into small chapters of members located throughout the country. It was devoted to the further study and development of cooperatism and its principles. Milt writes, quote, "After that class, John was really excited. He was convinced this was the future of humanity and was committed to finding ways to give it more recognition. He never became a fanatic, but did consider us forerunners. He wanted to be seen as a pioneer, a champion of this system. He felt cooperatism, or something like it, was humanity's best hope to achieve true equality and freedom. He was convinced that the money system had run its course and was headed for extinction. Fiat money, central banks, corporatocracies, the widening gap between the rich and the poor, the disappearing middle class, inflation, recessions, an overtaxed populace, bought politicians, overspending, huge government deficits, all of these things for him spelled out the eventual impending collapse of the money system. Cooperatism for him seemed the logical successor, the new hope. So he formed this group and asked people in the class if anyone had an interest in joining him. Scott, Patty, and I felt like we also had a desire to try and push this idea a bit further down the road, if we could, so we joined. At first, it was just the four of us, but soon we had a sizable number of students on campus interested. And after the book became popular, we got more and more outsiders. We built a website and had a splattering of members from all around the country, even some internationally. End quote. Patty then remembers, quote, "It was a full-time job just reading the emails we got. They poured in from people all over. We became like the official cooperativist organization. It just exploded. Thank God some very talented computer science students came on board and they were able to get a terrific website up and running for us. There was a flood of emails from people who loved us and hated us. We were called Marxists, socialists, and communists. We were also hailed as some sort of heroes. After the fervor of the book died down, so did the emails, but initially it was crazy. We ended up with a fair constituency. It was only a drop in the bucket compared to the general populace, but for us, it was very encouraging." End quote. Scott then recalls, quote, "At first the website was basically a blog where people could exchange ideas. Lots of good ideas and suggestions came in, which gave us thoughts as to what direction to head with the organization. Our primary mission was to educate and inform people, mostly young people, and encourage them to think about these ideas and to consider their future, their children's future, and the future of mankind as a whole as it headed down either of these two very different paths, cooperatism or money system." End quote. Then Patty tells us, quote, "What made our position particularly difficult was the fact that we didn't have all the answers. We were sort of flying by the seat of our pants. It was so new. Nobody had all the answers. Charlene's book was just a sketch. It pointed in a particular direction. It gave us a new perspective from where we could critically view the money system. It gave us a hint of a possible direction to go, a possible alternative to explore. It made us consider the fact that maybe there is another way, a better way. The money system in all its complexity didn't happen overnight, and so it would be with any new system. Problems needed to be worked out, solutions needed to be discovered, experimentation needed to happen. What we accomplished in the economics class was just a beginning, and a very meager beginning at that. It was all conjecture as to what a system like cooperatism might look like. It gave us a place to start, but nothing was set in stone. For most of us, what arose out of that class, I think, was hope, real hope, and a realization that the money system has been leading us and will continue to lead us down a path that is not beneficial to all of humanity, creating very unequal class systems, keeping a working class locked into place forever. But more importantly, hope that there may be another way for people to coexist without anyone needing to suffer. That's what draws me to this system. That's what gives me hope. Maybe in class we got it all wrong. Maybe that's not what a system like cooperatism will look like in the end. As I said, we were just winging it. We were just making it up as we went. But maybe what we did and what we're doing will inspire other groups to pick up where we leave off, correct what we may have gotten wrong, and take it farther until the kinks gradually get worked out. We didn't and don't have all the answers, but we're asking the right questions. How come life has to be like this? It doesn't. If people could see that this new general direction has merit, has possibility, and has many admirable advantages over the money system, then maybe this movement could gain some major support and momentum. End quote. Scott points out, quote, we wanted them to consider the money system's track record in terms of the injustices and imbalances it encourages, how it seems to periodically improve living standards for a time for some while forsaking others, whereas cooperatism seems to include everyone in its advantages, and it doesn't come with all the undesirable bureaucratic baggage and corruption inherent in a money system. It guarantees no one will go hungry or be homeless. And it does this without interfering with individual freedom. In fact, it widens it. End quote. Milt states, quote, the hardest thing was often just trying to get them to see outside of the box, the money system box. They always, with a look of disbelief, would ask, but how is any of this going to happen without money? End quote. Scott then tells us about John. Quote, John kept trying to figure out ways to implement cooperativist principles in some small way to gradually get people thinking differently. He felt people needed to experience it in some way in order to free themselves from their tunnel vision. But he found it was extremely difficult to implement cooperativist principles when engulfed in and surrounded by a capitalistic society. End quote. John explains to us some of his frustrations in this way. Quote, if you could get someone to listen long enough, you could explain to them that in a money-based economy, humanity can never get to enjoy the quality of life we all envision will be the future someday, where automation will replace human labor. The money system actually prevents it from happening. It prevents it by requiring people to have an income. As long as people are required to have an income, then jobs are needed. No jobs means no incomes. And in a money-based system, this spells disaster. You end up in a depression. And the only solution is to create jobs. There must be jobs. There must be people working. There must be income. If jobs dwindle due to technological advancements in automation, that is a bad thing in a money system. It may be a good thing in terms of technology, but it is a very bad thing for the average citizen because it will create job loss and therefore weaken the economy, affecting the working class's standard of living. Then we either have to find a way to create more jobs or suffer the consequences by way of a recession or depression. Therefore, we can never reach that futuristic utopia where everything is automated. And so we end up in this vicious circle, this frustrating closed loop. Technology will advance and keep giving us new gadgets to consume and use, but it will never be allowed to set humanity free from jobs. End quote. Here is how Milt approached it from his perspective. Quote, the money system needs, thrives on, and feeds off of the working class. It is its lifeblood. It doesn't want the working class to be too well off, just well off enough to be compulsive consumers and good worker bees. This is the foundation upon which the wealthy can exist, and everyone depends on this structure to continue. When you retire, you hope and pray that the system stays in place and remains economically strong, because that's what you're counting on for your retirement income, for your means to survive. We are all dependent on it. We all want people working. We are all better off when everyone, or almost everyone, is working. But what we really want is not to have to work at all, which is what we keep striving to achieve as we head towards retirement. But in order for that to happen, everyone else, or almost everyone else, has to be working. This idea that the general populace must be kept in a constant state of working for a living is only true in a money system. Whether or not advancements in technology and automation make it possible for people to work less and be freer to enjoy their lives, the money system can't and won't allow it. End quote. John adds, quote, I get those people, usually staunch conservatives, who always accuse me of laziness. All you liberals, they say, you all want something for nothing. You don't want to work, and you think everyone should be entitled to the good life. What a bunch of freeloaders. Because of their strong stereotype biases, it's always hard to convince them that it has nothing to do with laziness, trying to explain to them that it isn't work we object to, but rather the structure of a system that forces people to work for an income. It's like talking to the wall. If I am working with people toward a common goal for something we all need or want, something by which we will all benefit equally, then count me in. I will gladly work long, hard hours under those circumstances. In fact, I do. And those would be the circumstances under which a cooperative society would function. That is, except for the long, hard hours, because generally that won't be necessary in a cooperative system, unless, of course, an individual chooses that because he is working on something that interests him. The will to work won't disappear, but how you work and the benefit derived from working will change. It will be about what you do, not just the money you get from it. And isn't that how it should be? Shouldn't it be about the value of what we do, not just about the profit we make? We don't want to be working for someone for their benefit so they can make a lot of profit, but with others to achieve something we all want. End quote. Now we return to Scott's writings. Quote, so our website encouraged neighbors and communities to form small groups that would implement the cooperative principles in whatever way they could. This became a main focus of the Cooperatists of America and was successful to a moderate degree. There were open forums where practitioners could communicate ideas to one another, building on each other's experiences. Some groups were as small as 3 or 4 neighbors having a communal garden or sharing in the toil and the purchasing of tools. Each household would pitch in and share the responsibilities for the cultivation of these gardens. Often, it was church groups that were most successful in these ventures, using church property as a common ground. Some of these communities would jointly construct neighborhood greenhouses in order to extend the growing seasons in various climates. Many were able to take it even farther and create communal tool sheds or small barns where residents or members all donated equally to furnish it with tools and equipment that could be used and shared by everyone as the need arose. This would include things like lawnmowers, snow plowing or snow blowing equipment, land cultivation and gardening tools, ladders, woodworking tools, metalworking tools, and automotive tools. It was kind of like a library for tools instead of books. There were even some small housing developments that would pool money together to erect solar panels and windmills. These would be shared by the entire neighborhood, and the cost, maintenance, and benefits would be equally distributed, thereby decreasing everyone's residential energy costs. End quote. These examples cited by Scott were by no means common. But as Milt writes, quote, they did keep popping up, but were rarely reported in the news. And when they did make the news for whatever reason, they were reported carefully with a subtle bias that attached a quirkiness to it, or gave it a cultist spin, or insinuated religious overtones. If cooperativism was ever mentioned, it was mentioned with a subtle degree of sarcasm and attributed to well-meaning but naive individuals. End quote. Patty points out, quote, these groups were not always successful, no, no, no. More often than we would like to admit, there would be petty disputes over some members giving more and participating more than others, causing resentment and conflicts. And of course, these were the ones that drew the most media attention. But a portion of them did succeed, finding ways to work out their differences. The ones that seemed to work best were the ones affiliated with religious organizations or where the agreements were kept simple and where the members weren't sticklers for details and statistics with regard to who did what and how much. Those that had a tendency to be loose in these areas and more accepting, more tolerant of the varying participation of its members were the ones that seemed to flourish. End quote. So this is how it went for the cooperatists of America, gaining a little here and there and losing a little here and there.